Anyone who is still holding euros to save right now has completely lost control over their life. The SPD and the Union are currently discussing a special fund of 800 billion euros. No, not dollars, but euros. Just think about what a big deal this is. That means new expropriations and new devaluations of the euro are on the way. At the same time, this will trigger the next big Bitcoin catalyst. Because when fiat money goes to zero, then Bitcoin goes to the moon. This whole situation is really quite alarming. And anyone who is in the Eurozone should definitely be hearing alarm bells right now. But you definitely need to take action here. This is a massive threat that's coming our way. Donald Trump isn't sending any more money to Ukraine now. Now Germany and Europe have to pump a ton of money into Ukraine. And I don't want to judge whether that's good or bad. You can decide for yourselves whether that's a good thing or not. If you want to send money for the war in Ukraine, feel free to drop that in the comments below. What this is about is that money is being massively devalued. The more money we print. That's the sneaky part here. They're talking about special funds here, but what they're not telling you is that these special funds are nothing but debt. It's not an asset, it's debt. You're being cheated, lied to, and screwed over. You just can't say it any other way. It's not being communicated clearly and openly here. We could just say, okay, we're sending military equipment to Ukraine, and for that, we just need money. They could communicate that openly and clearly, but no, here they say, we're creating a special fund, and then it all gets funneled around the debt break somehow, and so on. And this all has to be pushed through quickly before a new coalition or anything can be formed. That's just so over the top, you can't even imagine it. A lot of people are in a deep sleep, and I just don't get how anyone can vote for something like this. And that's why I feel sorry for all the people who are involved here, who may have voted for freedom, who may have seen a change here, who were hoping for a change, and now they're stuck in this mess because there's really not much they can do about it. I mean, you can. Buy Bitcoin, that's the big recommendation. Get yourself some Bitcoin, not investment advice or anything. You can also leave the Eurozone, like I did, by simply voting with your feet. But I get that not everyone can do that, and not everyone wants to. I mean, I'm just saying, you shouldn't have to force things on people because, ideally, everything should be fine right in your own backyard. You don't have to leave the country for that. But as it stands now, nothing is changing. And then you really have to think about whether to leave the country. Feel free to write in the comments if you've thought about leaving the country. And what about that? Also, the tipping point would be where you'd say, okay, now it's really getting too hot for me. Now I pull the emergency brake and immigrate. But you can't just vote like, no, I don't want that or anything. Because this is basically decided behind closed doors, what's going on here. But hey, folks, this is just amazing. Check this out. Lottie writes here, we might soon see two special funds amounting to 900 billion euros. So I was actually too low with the 800 billion. And now check this out in converted terms. This means that everyone living in Germany will pay an additional 10,800 euros for the military and infrastructure. And France is pushing for more joint European debt. It's just unbelievable that this can be decided like this. And then they just say, okay, we're just going to devalue your money. And we already saw it during the Corona time. What happened during the Corona time? When we generated massive debt and significantly increased the money supply. Yeah, the whole thing is inflated. The euro has devalued. And that could really happen again here. It's going to happen again, but on steroids. And the big problem is that it probably won't just stop at the payment. So, feel free to share your thoughts with me. What do you think? Will it ever stop? So, are we going to create the special fund now? And then it just stops, and then the payment is made once and then the euro stabilizes again. Or is it more likely that we'll just keep creating endless wars here and dragging this thing out indefinitely? Then packages like this will also be funneled in here. As I said, I have relatively little to say about whether this is right or wrong. I find it really hard to categorize. But that's why you should drop that in the comments. It seems like there's really no end in sight, at least not with how things currently look. And that means after the special fund is before the special fund. Then the next special fund just comes along, then the next one, and the next, and the next. And then the central bank gets involved too. She will probably do some more. In the case of Corona, it was the PEP program or whatever other strange names they came up with. But it looks like everything is coming our way. That means, on one side from the Bundeswehr, the stimulus stories, then the central bank stories are coming in about reducing the deficit. That means the full brutal power that's rolling towards us now. And that is just. It's a shame on one hand, but on the other hand, hey, Bitcoin to the moon. Let's fucking go. Because, you know, Holocandle pre-contact. Okay, and now pay attention, there's another report here. And he calculated it all out even better here. He says here for your information, 800 billion euros in additional debt means 10,000 euros per citizen. Now we know that, from the little kid to the circle. And now here, watch out, 20,000 euros per household or 50,000 euros per net payer. And that's the circle. That means people who aren't productive here, who don't pay in here. And there are lots and lots of people who aren't productive in Germany, who are just living a nice life here, taking on all the social issues, just Netflix and chilling here. For them it costs about 10,000 euros, but they don't pay for it. Other people who control the situation pay. So, if you're a net taxpayer here in Germany, that special fund doesn't cost you just 10,000 euros, it actually costs you 50,000 euros. But to be fair, it is not the taxes. So, it doesn't cost you in the form of taxes that the net taxpayers somehow have to pay more here. But because the net taxpayers are generating wealth, and they might just leave that wealth sitting in savings. And that's how it gets devalued. And that's how the payment basically comes about. So, it's not a direct payment, but an indirect payment. I don't know if the numbers here are 100% accurate. Half of that is from the 50,000 euros. So, you got to work. And now they're just converting it for you, of course through backdoor tricks and stuff, not directly. They don't just come out and say, okay, hey, give me your money, or else I'll shoot you or something like that. Instead, it happens through backdoor tricks, special funds, and inflation. It's being taken away from you indirectly. And that's a really, really sneaky trick that's going on right now. There it is, even after the scandal in the White House. The CDU/CSU and SPD are examining a 2 billion euro special fund for defense and infrastructure. According to an insider, the old Bundestag is supposed to approve this. And that's also why a lot of people are so critical of the government, and a lot of people want to switch to Bitcoin because they just want to say, hey, okay, I want my money to be in my control. I don't want my money to be inflated away. I don't want the government deciding over my purchasing power. And even if it turns out to be a good decision later, often they're just bad decisions. And then, you have the problem that if enough people vote for a government, you as a small minority, if you say, okay, I don't want to send money to war zones, or I don't want to be part of these infrastructure packages, you can't just say, okay, I opt out. Because your money gets devalued. That means the politicians are always deciding over the purchasing power of your money, whether you like it or not. And the only way out of a monetary system where politics decides over your purchasing power is Bitcoin. And on one hand, it's really, really sad what's happening here. I just recently saw this in a tweet from the blog trainer, Roman, who wrote, hey, the whole world is healing, but in Germany, we don't see any healing. That really doesn't look so great. And it's really, really sad what's going on here. Especially when you have a freedom-oriented mindset and all. I mean, if you're already kind of drifting left and all lefty and stuff, thinks redistribution is awesome. And now let's tax the rich even more. Come on, let's take even more money from the super rich, so they all just run off abroad and stuff. Then what's going on here is obviously great. But if you're trying to be free-minded, then what's happening here is an absolute no-go, right? And that's why the story here is, hey, invest in assets that aren't inflated by politics. I'll put a link down below too. Bitcoin, of course, is a super hot topic right now, but you can actually buy Bitcoin, and with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when purchasing Bitcoin. So, that's an absolute recommendation, no financial advice. You obviously have to make your own decisions. Here's an interesting clip that just popped up.
The conversation is about two new special funds. They could still be passed with a 2/3 majority in the old Bundestag. Marcus Price in Berlin, how should these special funds actually look?
There's talk of a special fund for the Bundeswehr and one for investments in infrastructure. And the numbers being thrown around are really huge. Each one is 400 billion euros in debt, so that's a total of 800 billion euros.
At the beginning, they're talking about special funds, and in the end, it's all about debt. At least that's a somewhat fairer debate. But in politics, they never talk about debt here, only about special funds. And that's just, as already mentioned, it's really, really nasty. Fortunately, we have to say that it hasn't been confirmed yet, so this is just the current debate. It's not official yet, but they're saying you need to be relatively quick here, because otherwise, time is running out. Otherwise, there might be a new coalition or something, new political arrangements, and then it wouldn't be possible to push this special fund through anymore. It also says here at T-Online that hesitation would be fatal. Time is running out, especially after the Trump administration threatened to scale back the U.S. military protection for Europe. The continent needs to take more responsibility for its own security. The chairwoman of the German Council of Economic Experts, Monika Schnitzer, believes that the designated Bundeswehr has a duty towards people. You have to send a strong signal, says the economic expert. Hesitation would be fatal. Even the Bavarian Prime Minister Markus Söder sees that, after the recent tensions between Trump and Zelensky, there's a real need for urgency. So, the situation is really on the verge of escalating, and now there's even more pressure being applied. And I just have a very simple point of view. For example, when people voluntarily give money, when people voluntarily pay fees, or when people say, hey, voluntarily, you're doing something good, I'll give you money here, of my own accord. If you redistribute it, then I'm totally fine with that. But if purchasing power is really redistributed here without also taking into account the permission of the people, that you just do things behind the scenes and have special assets, I think it's unfair. And when you rack up debts like that, you should at least play with your cards on the table. Because what's happening here isn't a fair, open debate. They're definitely using lies to build this whole thing up. And yeah, I know, the situation in Ukraine is really, really tough. And I can assess that it's all very, very complicated. But the fact is, we have these waves of expropriation coming at us. That's just a fact that you can't, let's say, ignore. That means the expropriation is in full swing. You can't ignore it. Just a quick word from DR. Alex Frankenberg, who is also in on this. What does it say? It says here, Hubert Aiwanger is really writing that you guys are talking about almost $1 trillion in new debt, but you still don't have a solution for citizen income, or illegal migration, competitiveness, economy, working hours, flexibility, etc. And then Alex von Frankenberg writes, it couldn't be more obvious, Bitcoin bull run ahead. So, yeah, you can see it like this. Oh, check it out, the cool view of the sea. You can see what an awesome spot I'm in. So, you can look at it negatively, like, oh crap, purchasing power is dwindling, the euro is heading towards zero, and blah blah blah. But you can also look at it positively. All of this will push Bitcoin further ahead. And now, attention, there was a really, really good video edit from Torsten Stelter. So, you guys are doing a comprehensive overview of what the situation looks like in the Eurozone and in Germany and so on. That's very, very accurate. To that, I want to play that for you now. It's just awesome how you guys are summarizing this. And you can really see the predicament we're in right now.
What Bourse Online readers are very well aware of is that we're at the end of decades-long cycles. On one hand, we had the topic, global debt. Debt has risen enormously. I'm saying others too. We're dealing with high public debt. We're dealing with high private debt. We're dealing with, because of this debt, also very structurally overvalued assets. So, the global perspective. And we see that we've pretty much reached the end. We don't have many options left. Central banks can't just keep pushing interest rates down like they could a few years ago. Keyword, inflation. Countries can always rack up as much debt as they want, so we have some issues there. In addition, we have the situation in Europe, which applies globally but is even more pronounced here. Think of France, think of Italy, structurally highly indebted countries. I'm intentionally saying countries because, speaking of France, we have a very high level of state debt, but also for businesses and private households. A bit of a difference compared to Italy. The private sector is very lightly indebted. This is purely a government debt problem. And on top of that, we have all the problems with the euro that we know of, which have been masked for years by the ethical diet central bank. And that's a mixed situation where I've said, it's clearly my scenario, that we will only get a handle on this issue. 2. A positive scenario, financial repression. That means through intervention in such a way that interest rates are kept below the nominal growth rate. And we won't have that much real growth, so it's more about inflation to effectively expropriate the creditors and thus reduce the debt relative to the nominal gross domestic product. And it's just an environment where it's tough to be a saver. And especially tough to be a saver, like the Germans. There are. And here, especially in. Savers invest in life insurance and similar things. But even as a state, saving, it's only reckless driver in the Eurozone. Everyone is going into debt and doesn't even dream of saving. And then we are the solid ones. And the gratitude shows itself in such a way that people say, yeah, help us out, just slide some money our way. Keyword, reconstruction fund. Or it's nice that you're so frugal and through your solidity, you're generating cheap interest rates for us. Then we can keep piling on the debt. And that's why I said we're basically facing a decade where all these trends are going to flip. And we just have to devalue the assets. And we have to devalue the debt relative to economic output. And the simple way, as I said, or at least the less painful way, is financial repression and low inflation. The alternative paths are basically bankruptcies, expropriations, etc. And that's why I said, the cadres, asset destruction is looming. And in that regard, I would have wished that was also a podcast I did about it, that we in Germany have an answer to that. And everyone can give the answer in that DL to that. He reads their magazines. I cover the right one. But the state should actually provide the right answer to that. And I don't see that happening. But that is the fact of debt, that discussions about debt and the like are unfortunately simply a bit complicated to navigate. We can discuss that.
So, you heard it. Top economist Daniel Stelter also talks about financial repression, expropriation, and a shockwave that's coming our way because the system is simply at its end. That doesn't just mean we're in a war situation right now, but also in general, we're simply at a phase in the business cycle or the economic cycle where everything is falling apart. And then such an exploding monetary system just has to do one thing: even more expropriation, even more repression, even more problems, even more bureaucracy, even more whatever. And that's a giant octopus that's basically thrashing around and trying to suck in everything it can, or like a black hole that tries to suck in everything it can. And on the other side, it's printing everything it can. And that ultimately means a massive loss of purchasing power, potentially leading to hyperinflation. I mean, I don't want to call that out just yet, or something. I mean, that's always the big conspiracy theory when someone says, yeah, the euro is going to hyperinflate at some point or something. But, I mean, it's not that unlikely, given how things currently look. It's probably not going to lead to hyperinflation, but more like high inflation. Or, if things keep going like this, I can definitely see that happening. And now we have voices like Daniel Stelter, who isn't exactly known as a conspiracy theorist, or is known as a crash prophet or something like that, who is now also ultra pessimistic. So, if he's already sounding the alarm, then things are really on fire here. He says, yes, here too, the HUD is burning, folks. You really need to check this out. The house is on fire. So, it's not like everything is just fine here anymore. Everything's peachy, everything's cool, and all. I mean, that used to be the case. But we still think that's how it is. And a lot of people are going to miss the reality check here. And then they'll end up hitting a really hard wall. And then at some point they'll realize, crap, I've been massively blindsided. And now you can still do something about it. And now you can still get out of this. Either you pack your 2 feet in your suitcase and run away. Or, I'd say it's financially moving out, but it's still kind of here in the country. But you have to do something, at least financially move out. So, nothing else really fits in the bag. That means, everyone, I already said it at the beginning, whoever is still saving in euros has lost control over their life. Guys, peace out.